What the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. That's a quote taken from the first book that we're going to cover in the Help Yourself book club. And it's a book written by Napoleon Hill and published back in 1937, a book called Think and Grow Rich. It's probably one of the most inspirational and authentic self-help books ever written. And it's still as relevant today as it was when it was published back in 1937. It took Napoleon Hill 20 years to complete, and to complete it, he spoke to over 500 of the most successful men and women around of his time. And I know the first time I tried to read Think and Grow Rich, I found it a really hard book to read. But looking back on it now, when I've tried to read it, I just cannot understand what I found so difficult to start with. But I think that sort of covers the growth of the personal growth journey. I'm obviously a different person from when I first tried to read that book. And that is the thing. However, as long as you put into practice what you read in this personal growth area, then you will be a different person when you next read a book. And why shouldn't you reread and reread a book? Because you will see lots of different things that you didn't pick up the first, second or third time. However, as my mentor, or one of my mentors, Peter Sage, says, knowing and not doing is the same as not knowing. And lots of people I know have self-help books, but they're more called shelf-help books because that's where they stay on the shelf and they never get read once, let alone 2 or 3 times. Okay, so Napoleon Hill was born in 1883 and he became an advisor to a very powerful man of the time called Andrew Carnegie. And Andrew Carnegie saw something in Napoleon Hill and he commissioned him to explain the process of success. And in the start of this book, Napoleon Hill actually says that the money-making secret is covered in every single chapter of this book, and it's mentioned at least 100 times throughout. However, it really will only appear for those who are ready and are for searching for it. But he also points out that whether it's fame, money, recognition, or happiness, or anything, they're all available to us, but only to those who are determined to have these blessings. And at the end, he gives a clue that if you're ready, you already possess 1/2 of the secret, and that you'll recognize the other half of the secret the moment it reaches your mind. He then goes on to tell 3 stories. The first one is about a man called Edwin C. Barnes, who thought his way into partnership with Thomas Edison. He then tells another story about a man called R.U. Darby, who stopped when he was 3 feet from gold. And this is what Napoleon Hill says is the most common cause of failure. It's quitting when facing a temporary defeat. And then the third story he tells is about not taking no for an answer. And that story involves R.U. Darby, who sees his very successful uncle beaten into giving 50 cents to a very persistent little coloured girl. I hope we're allowed to say coloured these days, but that's how Napoleon Hill describes it in his book. So I've now got a couple of quotes and I'm going to read them word for word because I think they are really important. Okay, one of the main weaknesses of mankind is the average man's familiarity with the word impossible. He knows all the rules which will not work. He knows all the things which cannot be done. But this book was written for those who seek the rules which have made others successful and are willing to stake everything on those rules. Because success comes to those who become success conscious, whereas failure comes to those who indifferently allow themselves to become failure conscious. And then he also quotes the words of Henley, who wrote the prophetic lines, "I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul." And Napoleon Hill says he should have informed us that we are the masters of our fate, the captains of our souls, because we have the power to control our thoughts. Now, before publishing Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill received a letter from a member of Congress who 15 years previously had been in college and had heard Napoleon Hill speak there. And he talked about the principle that we'll cover in chapter 1. And he decided, before Napoleon Hill had finished his speech, to make a place for himself in this world, no matter how many difficulties he had to overcome. I'm just going to read the last paragraph of that letter, which says, "There are thousands of people in America today who would like to know how they can convert ideas into money. People who must start at scratch without finances and recoup their losses. If anyone can help them, you can. If you publish this book, I would like to own the first copy that comes from the press. Personally autographed by you. With best wishes, believe me, cordially yours, Jennings Randolph." And that is just as relevant today as I'm recording this in 2022. We're in a very severe credit crisis. So this book, as I've said at the start, is just as relevant today.